So in your book on page 410, let's go through a couple of numbers. The current account, the capital account, the official reserve account. So current account. Current account is exports, imports, and net unilateral transfers abroad. Excuse me. All right. So exports, all those numbers are going to be debits or credits?
Credits.
Credits. Because even though we're exporting goods or merchandise, we're exporting services, there's all kinds of stuff we sell to other countries. The money that comes back, all right, is a plus for us, so that is a credit. Okay? Now, we don't just export stuff, we import stuff. And you all know that not only that that's a debit, but what's the difference right now? Do you think if you take exports minus imports that we have a positive or a negative number as a country? We have a negative number, right? So they try to make this pretty realistic, although it's not quite this close in your book, all right? So imports of goods and services, any kind, all right? Even income from foreign assets in the United States, all that would result in money flowing out, capital outflow for the United States. So those are all negative numbers, those are all debits, okay? Most of the time when people are talking about the trade imbalance that we have with China or with other countries abroad, okay, they're usually referring to this line right below, near the bottom of the current account, right above the balance, merchandise trade balance, okay? And if you look at one port, I mentioned this before, LA Long Beach Harbor, we have a trade imbalance, if that was the only place that we ever did trade for the United States, of maybe 1 to 10. We import 10 times more than we export from that one port. Okay? So, realistically so, in your book, they give an example of a negative current account balance. All right? But it's not just merchandise, not just services, it's not just net unilateral transfers abroad. What are some other examples in the current account? Okay, foreign aid. Foreign aid would get counted in the current account. If we send money as a country to Africa, to Colombia, that counts as to Japan, right? Something recent. Libya, right? What does that count as? A debit or a credit?
We send money.
We send money.
That's debit.
That would be a debit, right? What if?
That's a credit.
Let's say you're my mom. Mom's worked a long life. She's been an outstanding nurse and a waitress even earlier than that. She's been paying into Social Security. She's turning 65 very soon. And she says, all right, honey, I love you. I'll miss the grandkids, but I'm moving to France. The United States would send her Social Security checks in France. Would that be a capital outflow for the United States or an inflow? Outflow would be a debit or a credit.
Debit, but what would they really do?
Oh.
They would do that.
So as long as you pay into it.
As long as you paid into it. Yeah.
Wait, what if you become a French citizen? It's not that you paid your taxes.
You paid into it all these years.
Yeah, your taxes all the time.
Yeah.
So you're going to get your money.
So U.S. citizens, Social Security, that goes under net unilateral transfers abroad. This number 3 under current account, meaning unilateral just means one way, right? The other stuff was two-way. It was, all right, I'm going to sell you an iPhone, but you better pay for it, right? I'm going to sell you this travel service. You can use my airline, but you better pay for it. I'll give you a ride, but you better pay for it. These are a one-way. It's, hey, you know what? Here's your money. Enjoy your retirement. We don't expect anything back. You know what, Japan? You're in a horrible situation. Here's money in the form of aid, for aid. We don't expect anything back. That's unilateral. That's what that means. Net unilateral transfers abroad. Remember we talked about transfer payments domestically in this country, where the federal government just gives money to the states or the local government? That's one way as well. But this is outside of the country. Right? What about? Let's see. I know people who are born and raised most of their lives in Mexico. Now they live here, but they have family that still live in Mexico, and they send money back home. What would that be? A debit or a credit? That would be a debit for the United States. Right? Money is flowing out from the United States, and that also fits under net unilateral transfers abroad. Okay, so Follow the money. That's the big thing with the balance of payments. Which way is money going? For whatever reason. Okay, and that'll help you figure out whether it's a debit or a credit. Now, these things are supposed to balance out. Look at the very bottom of all the balance of payments. Current account, capital account, official reserve account, all right? Our country as well as other country have assets in reserve. When you get to the very end, the whole thing's supposed to balance because all the money, kind of like a circular flow, this phrase in science comes to mind, you know, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. All the cash, the sources of cash must equal the uses of the cash. So write that down. The sources of cash must equal the uses of cash. And I didn't find that anywhere in this chapter. We're only tracking stuff that leaves a country for another country, right? If savings that's accumulated in another country and comes back to this country,
No, what if the money that we get, we save and don't?
that's not something that's tracking the balance of payments, because balance of payments is looking at what's going back and forth over borders.
Sources of cash equal use of-
So I'm talking about the sources of cash when we have transactions between countries. Sources of cash must equal the uses of cash. And so you have to have this whole thing equal 0 at the end. If it doesn't, that's where statistical discrepancy comes in. In your book, what is that number? It's a positive what? 18. 18 billion. Now if you're tracking like several $1 trillion worth of cash, of money going and coming from your country, you know, a few dozen billion isn't too bad. You know, 12, 16, 18, 20 billion as a statistical discrepancy. Because does the government really, can they possibly even track all this money? No. Do they track, like I have a housekeeper, all right? She's got family in Mexico. She sends money home. Government doesn't know about it. Do they track that? No. So the numbers aren't going to come out to be exactly balanced the way that we expect because there are limitations to government. And that's where statistical discrepancy comes in. You say in this example, there was $18 billion worth of money that we could not track, you know, going and coming from our country, capital inflow and outflow, you know, or as a result of the sale of, you know, merchandise and services and all this other stuff. Okay, so that's how the numbers all come out. It's time to do some questions. And I want you to specifically go to the 2005 exam and go to question 42, because that connects directly to this. Tell me now what you think the answer is to question 42. And by the way, question 42 got the lowest score of any question in the multiple choice section. 84% of the kids got it wrong.
42.
Number 42. But hopefully now it makes a little more sense why the answer is the answer.
I did this one.
Right, I know we've done it. But does it make more sense now, a little bit? That's right, because you have to balance out, balance of payments would dictate that the answer is B. If a country has a current account deficit, deficit means they have a negative number, there were more debits than credits, then at some point it has to balance out. So there must be a surplus in the capital account. A surplus in the capital account, okay? All right, let's do a few more though. Let's go to 45. Any questions on 42? And we didn't go too fast on that, right? 45. When they say capital stock, they're talking about financial capital. Financial capital. This was a 51%. So what do you think? Show me the answer. C was the answer. There's an increase in investment demand, and the real interest rate rises, Let's go right back up here to our example. The real interest rate goes up in the United States. What's likely to happen? That the amount of financial capital in our country is going to increase or decrease? It's going to increase because it's going to flow in. Financial capital, money is going to flow into our country. Okay? So it has to be A, B, or C. And what's going to happen to the value of the dollar? Well, take a look up there. It's going to go up. So the answer is C. Any questions about 45? All right, let's do 52. 52. And that was a 54%er. We've also done this one, some of you guys more than once. Is A possible? I think it's possible. I don't know that it's very probable. I don't know that the two are directly linked. If you have a decrease in aggregate demand after the economy is in equilibrium, would you have a decrease in voluntary unemployment? Perhaps. I mean, maybe times get tight because 80 shifts left and some people give up looking for work, but I don't think that's the best answer. I'm willing to say it's possible. That's not the best answer. The best answer is D, right? An increase in unplanned inventories. You operate a business. Raise your hand if you operated a business for business econ. What'd you sell?
Dog tags.
Dog tags. One of the most traumatic experiences of your life, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Difficulty with everything, pretty much we did. From getting them to engraving them to giving them out.
Okay. And what did you sell? Edible ornaments. What'd you sell? Lanyards. Who else? Ben? No. Maybe you had it a couple years ago. What'd you sell?
Guitar Hero Tournament.
Guitar Hero Tournament. This was a service, right? Not a product, not merchandise, but a service. Yes?
Sandwiches and
Sandwiches.
Sandwiches and a t-shirt.
T-shirts. You're going to have another appearance on T-shirts in a couple of weeks. We'll have to send you. All right. So, if you were operating for more than one day, obviously, okay, and there would seem to be strong demand, wouldn't you order more shirts in your inventory? And you did. Okay. How many did you sell? Do you remember?
I'll tell you 100 now. Or maybe a little bit less.
Have you sold any this year?
Yeah.
Really?
I sold a bunch of them, something like that.
Wow, that's cool. All right. What about sandwiches? You were open for several months.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you at some point start to like regularly buy more inventory? Then all of a sudden demand shifts. Not just for you, but for demand for all stuff in the entire economy, right? We're talking about aggregate demand in this question. Then what's going to happen? You're going to have an increase in your unplanned inventories. You didn't plan on having all this stuff built up. That's more or less what's happening with us in higher grounds, okay? Because of the economic situation, because of the increase in commodity prices, all right? But let's look at the entire economy. AD has been kind of on the ropes in the United States. That's why several months ago, the cover of Newsweek said, with a picture of Uncle Sam pointing at you, we want you to spend to help the economy. We want AD to shift to the right, but they wouldn't say that because nobody knows what AD is, except for econ students, all right? So if AD shifts to the left, you have leftover inventory like we do in the cafe. We've got mounds of coffee bags sitting up there, okay? So that's why D's a good answer for this, 52. D's the answer. All right, let's do 53. This formula is important. So many times this semester we've said we don't care so much about nominal, we care about real. What is the real income? What is the real interest rate? What is real GDP? Or in other words, what is the number when you take out inflation? Now in the case of an interest rate, the formula literally is, if you're going to find the real interest rate, it's the nominal interest rate minus expected inflation. Right? So Kobe, I don't know how many of you know Kobe, but Kobe's got all kinds of crazy ideas and he reads these books about how to rip people off and he's been a businessman for a while. So he's pretty savvy when it comes to money. I'm not saying he's shady, I'm just saying he's well informed. So let's say Kobe says, you know what I'm going to do this year, Gideon? I'm going to open up a bank. And we're going to call it the Bank of Kobe. And would you like to be my first customer? And I say, sure, Kobe, I'll, whatever I can do to support you. And I need some money. I need to take a class to brush up on my econ skills this summer. I want to go to Harvard and take a class. And he says, no problem. I'll give you a loan. And you're going to charge me how much? 8%. Fine, 8%. All right. Now, he says, you got to pay me back in a year. Is that the real interest rate he's going to charge me?
No, that's
Not really, because if I pay him back in a year, if prices go up in that time in this country, will the money be worth the same when I pay it back to him or not? It's going to be worth less, isn't it? But Kobe's so smart, he figures that in. And he probably expects inflation to be, oh, what? What do you think inflation is going to be? What do you expect inflation to be in the next year? He says 3%. That's a reasonable guess. Right? So what's the real interest rate in Kobe's mind that he's charging me? Is it 8%? No, it's 8% minus inflation, which he thinks is going to be 3%. It's actually 5%. That's what he's really making. That's what the real interest rate is in his mind. Now, I just saw a report that last month, prices went up 0.5%. So I expect, if I just take that 1 month and multiply it out for 12 months, then it'll be 6% inflation. What do I think the real interest rate is? 2%, right? It's 8 minus 6. So let's say we get to the end of the year and we actually find out who's right. It's 6% because I'm always right. And so what happens? Does he win or lose? He loses, not just because he guessed wrong, but more importantly because the money that I pay him back with after prices go up to 6% for that year is worth even less than the 3% he was planning on, right? Okay? So that comes back to 53. Let's take each of these question answers one at a time. It says, which of the following will be true if the actual rate of inflation were less than the expected rate of inflation? A, inflation has been underpredicted. No, it's the opposite. Inflation has been overpredicted, hasn't it? All right, so that's why A is not true. What about B? The real interest rate had exceeded the nominal interest rate. Well, we don't know what happened because they never gave us the numbers. We don't know if the real interest rate exceeded the nominal interest rate because they never gave us actual numbers. So you can't calculate B. What about C? The real interest rate had been negative. Not necessarily. It all depends, once again, on what the numbers were. The answer was D. People who borrowed funds at the nominal interest rate during this time period would lose, especially if they weren't expecting what actually transpired, okay? Because they have to pay back the money when it's going to be worth more than they thought it was going to be. They didn't think it was going to be worth as much, all right? So if I took out a loan from Kobe and all of a sudden now the rate of inflation is less than what I expected it to be, I thought I was going to win. I thought I was going to pay him back with this money that wasn't worth very much a year from now. It's actually worth more than we thought it was going to be. So Kobe kind of wins, I lose, right? And for E, that's not true. The economy would expand because of the increased investment and spending. No, because the real interest rate's going up. If the real interest rate is going up, that gets more expensive for people to take out loans, right? Remember the whole chain reaction with the Fed? Write that out right now. Write down in your notes, and then I'm going to ask you what the answer is to this question. If the Federal Reserve decreased the money supply, what would happen? Ceteris paribus. What chain reaction would ensue? All right, so they increase the money supply. Sorry. decrease the money supply. That's what I want. They decrease the money supply.
Loans go.
Right, here's the money market.
Loans go down.
Goes this way.
Consumption and investment go down.
Right. That's right. Interest rates go up.
And
Loans go down.
more unemployment.
Less employment.
Less output and less income. And
Right. There's a big lump of stuff at the end, right? They don't lead to each other. So don't make that mistake with your arrows. Don't say greater income, which leads to greater output. No, no, no. It's all the same. There is and, not leads to. It's and. You need to say it in words. Don't use symbols on the AP exam. We've been using
You just
short.
say AD to the left, or like bracket to the left, isn't everything else wide already?
Not necessarily. No. Now, if they want to know, if we answer the question, see, this is the cardinal rule on the exam. Answer the question that's asked. So if they say, what happens to aggregate demand, that's all you have to say. But if they say, you know, they're more general, then you should take it further yourself and say, aggregate demand will shift left, which means incomes will decrease, output will decrease, all this other stuff will happen, right?
Maybe we'll mark you off if you add more and like you're wrong, right?
Nope. They don't count against you. That's why I've been training you to kind of throw in the multiplication and say it's true, because it won't hurt you. Okay? So take a look at E. So it says the economy would expand. No, the economy is not going to expand because real interest rates are higher. You need to have real interest rates go down, right? Whether it's nominal or real interest rates, they have to go down for the economy to expand. All right, let's do 54. This should take you 15 seconds. Your average is a minute 10.
Each question?
That's how it averages out, because you have 60 questions set on
All you gotta do is look at all of them and then look at the one that's changed.
Yeah, I think the first three have nothing to do with banks, with the monetary policy of the Fed, right? That's fiscal policy. The answer is D. Don't mess around. I'll get your feedback and say he's not allowed to take the exam because he wasn't ready.
I'm ready to
55, do it. 55. Now careful, there's a treacherous landmine in this question known as the spending multiplier. According to Keynes, an increase in government spending is supposed to have a big impact. It's more than whatever they do. If they do an increase of 100 billion, it's supposed to have more of an impact than 100 billion. It's supposed to be times 1 over 1 minus MPC. So the answer is B. Sure sounded like D to me. It's all right, we got time. I can cancel. They won't have a test here for you. Just stay home that day and sleep in. Yes.
No, he didn't. He said D. I said E.
So it's his fault?
So increase the money supply. What is plant and equipment? Oh,
Plant and equipment is-
That's a big I for C plus I plus G and N.
Alright, so decrease the money supply.
Increasing money supply increases loans, which increases aggregate demand in the end. I'm ready. Ready for right now.
All right, fine. Then answer 56. If everybody gets 56 correct, then I'll show you something fun for the last 10 minutes of the class. It won't be. Well, that's fun too, but I had something else.
After 56, can you explain 58?
Sure. What do you say, Connor? Thanks. Matt, what do you think? Ben? Haley? What do you three think? The answer is
For which question?
56.
Gee.
Start with 55.
No.
Oh,
Is
that
that
was
B?
like ages ago.
I was
It's
distracted
55.
by Mr. Chin walking by.
Yeah, 55 would be.
He's an interesting person.
56?
Yes, he's the best.
Bobby got 55 right. He said B. Bob.
I'm waiting on Kayla's answer. Toby, what do you think? You too?
B.
It's all tequila.
Is this too much pressure?
B.
Why B?
Because,
So everyone else said.
yeah.
No, not because everyone else said it. Because
Because of the
Yeah,
multiple
no,
choice,
it's-
right?
sure, Ben.
Okay, well,
1 minus.
Oh, because 1 over 20.
1 over R.
Yeah, times the reserves.
but they're keeping in some other access.
So there's cash leakage.
That formula is supposed to project the.
Yeah, yeah.
They're selling those this semester. Is that an announcement you've been hearing, hopefully?
Yeah.
The sixth finger. I told people, take out the announcement. Right, that's supposed to project the potential increase in the money supply, but it won't reach its potential if you have cash leakage or you have banks not loaning all of their excess reserves in, right? And that's what they're talking about here.
It's gonna be 5 billion.
So it's going to be less.
So less than the 5 million.
All right,
58, how much?
Less than
What?
5 million.
58.
Is that the price level supposed to be on cost?
You thought what was supposed to be constant?
Isn't it like, it's quantity theory?
Velocity, right?
MV equals
V, the MV must be equal to PQ.
MV and P or
That's the equation of exchange. And then the quantity theory of money takes it a step further and says, well, not only must MV equal PQ, but we think in the short run, 2 parts of that formula are constant. V doesn't change. So you have the 2 pieces. You get it, just know, those are the 2 pieces. All right, well, let's do the best we can to watch this. We feeling pretty good right now about the exam?
Yeah.
Are we? I mean, it's not going to be this. It's going to be mixed up. All right, I realize that. Use AP Central. All right, you're not babies. For me to sit here and walk you through AP Central and going through the past questions is something that I think will be counterproductive because you can do that at home.
do you want to record?
No, please stop it, please.